In the early 1900s, Europe appeared calm, confident, and modern. Cities were expanding, factories were producing at record speed, and people believed technology had finally defeated chaos. Trains connected nations, newspapers spoke of progress, and war felt like an outdated concept from another century. Ordinary people trusted that leaders knew what they were doing. But beneath this calm surface, fear was quietly growing. Governments were stockpiling weapons, armies were expanding. Diplomacy existed, but trust did not. Every nation watched its neighbors closely, assuming the worst. Peace wasn't real peace, it was silence created by denial. And silence does not last forever. By 1914, Europe was ruled by empires that were already decaying. The Ottoman Empire was called the sick man of Europe. Austria-Hungary was a patchwork of ethnic groups barely held together. Russia was vast but unstable, ruled by a disconnected monarchy. These empires looked strong on maps, but inside they were cracking. Leaders feared collapse more than war. War, they believed, could unite their people, silence unrest, and restore pride. What they didn't understand was that war would do the opposite. It would finish what decay had started. Germany was different. It was young, unified, industrial, and fast. While older empires were slowing down, Germany was accelerating. Factories roared, railways spread like veins. Its army was modern, disciplined, and confident. To Britain and France, Germany didn't just look competitive, it looked unstoppable. Fear replaced diplomacy. Every German success felt like a warning. Instead of cooperation, Europe chose suspicion. Instead of balance, it chose rivalry. Alliances were meant to protect peace. Instead, they removed freedom. Nations promised to defend each other no matter what. This meant one conflict could pull everyone in. Leaders lost the ability to pause or rethink. Once a crisis began, the machine moved on its own. War plans were automatic. Mobilization meant escalation. There was no off switch. Europe had created a system where a single mistake could ignite the entire continent. Nationalism gave people identity, but it also created hatred. Ethnic groups wanted independence. Borders became emotional wounds. In the Balkans especially, resentment built over decades. Every group believed history owed them justice. Compromise felt like betrayal. Violence became acceptable. Political assassination was no longer shocking, it was expected. Europe was soaked in fuel, and nationalism held the matches. Most leaders believed war would be quick. Soldiers would march, fight, and return as heroes. No one imagined years of mud, gas, and mass death. This belief made war seem manageable. It removed fear. It made war a gamble worth taking. If leaders had understood what modern weapons would do, history might have changed, but optimism blinded them. Weapons had evolved, but thinking had not. Machine guns, heavy artillery, and rail logistics changed warfare completely. Generals still planned as if courage could defeat bullets. The result would be catastrophic. Industrial power turned battlefields into factories of death. Progress became a weapon against humanity itself. By 1914, diplomacy no longer meant trust, it meant suspicion. Every delay was seen as weakness, every compromise felt dangerous. Leaders stopped listening. Fear became policy. Decisions were rushed, not because they were smart, but because waiting felt worse than acting. The Balkans had long been unstable. Secret groups, revolts, and assassinations were common. Great powers watched closely, not to calm the region, but to use it. Everyone knew something would explode. No one knew when. Europe was waiting for a spark. On June 28, 1914, Sarajevo looked ordinary. People filled the streets. Shops were open. No one believed history was about to change. Archduke Franz Ferdinand arrived to inspect troops, unaware that several young men were waiting with guns and bombs. They were nervous, untrained, and driven by anger more than skill. One assassin failed. Another panicked. The plan was already collapsing. Then fate intervened. The Archduke's car took a wrong turn. It stopped just meters from Gavrilo Princip. One shot killed the Archduke. Another killed his wife. The crowd froze. This wasn't just murder. It was the spark Europe had been waiting for. A local act of violence suddenly became an international crisis. What followed was not justice, but momentum. And momentum does not ask questions. Austria-Hungary did not want answers. It wanted control. The empire feared that weakness would invite rebellion. Serbia was blamed immediately. Evidence barely mattered. The assassination became an excuse, not a cause. Leaders spoke of honor, but they meant authority. For weeks, Vienna prepared a response designed to humiliate Serbia beyond recovery. They were confident Russia would stay silent. They were wrong. What mattered wasn't guilt, but perception. If Austria-Hungary failed to respond aggressively, its empire would fracture. War became a tool of survival. In choosing force, they believed they were restoring order. In reality, they were opening a door that could never be closed again. Austria-Hungary sent Serbia an ultimatum designed to fail. The demands stripped Serbia of sovereignty. Accepting them would mean surrender. Rejecting them meant war. Serbia accepted almost everything. Almost. One condition crossed the line. Austria-Hungary ignored the compromise. The decision had already been made. Diplomacy had become theater. Newspapers inflamed public anger. Leaders framed the situation as inevitable. When war was declared, celebrations erupted. People believed strength had been restored. They did not understand what had just been unleashed. A signature on paper had triggered a chain reaction that no human could stop. Russia could not afford to appear weak. It saw itself as protector of Slavic nations. If Serbia fell, Russia's influence would collapse. Mobilization orders were issued, trains moved, soldiers gathered. Leaders assumed this would pressure Austria-Hungary into negotiation. Instead, it escalated fear. Germany viewed Russian mobilization as an existential threat. In the logic of the time, waiting was dangerous, speed was safety. Russia did not want world war, but it stepped onto the path anyway, believing it could still turn back. It could not. Germany believed war was inevitable. Its generals had planned for this moment for years. Once Russia mobilized, Germany felt trapped. Delay meant disaster. War plans were rigid. Mobilization was irreversible. Diplomacy was sidelined. Germany declared war on Russia, then France. Leaders convinced themselves speed would bring victory. They believed decisive action would prevent chaos. Instead, it guaranteed it. The war machine was now fully awake, and it would not stop for anyone. Belgium wanted neutrality. It had no interest in war. Germany invaded anyway. Strategy demanded speed. Neutrality became irrelevant. Belgian civilians watched foreign armies march through their towns. Homes were destroyed. Families fled. This invasion shocked the world. It turned sympathy into outrage. War was no longer theoretical. It had faces, names, and refugees. Belgium's suffering changed everything. It forced Britain's hand. Britain hesitated. It preferred distance. But Belgium's invasion crossed a line. Treaties mattered. Reputation mattered. Britain declared war on Germany. The conflict was no longer continental. It was global. Colonies, trade routes, and oceans became battlegrounds. Ordinary people still believed it would be over by Christmas. They were wrong. The scale of the war was now unstoppable. By August 1914, there was no exit. Every major power was committed. Retreat meant humiliation. Compromise meant collapse. Leaders convinced themselves there was no alternative. Millions marched towards slaughter, believing it was necessary. Europe had locked the door behind itself. The war everyone thought would be short was about to redefine suffering forever. The first clashes in the West were fast, loud, and confusing. Soldiers marched forward wearing bright uniforms, convinced courage alone could stop bullets. Generals still believed in old wars, old rules, old glory. Reality arrived instantly. Machine guns tore through advancing lines. Men fell in seconds. Entire units vanished before they understood what was happening. There was no heroic duel, no clear enemy in sight, just noise, smoke, and death. Survivors froze in shock. This was not the war they were promised, and yet they were ordered forward again. The Western Front began not with strategy, but with disbelief. After weeks of slaughter, armies stopped moving. Attacking meant dying. Retreat meant disgrace. So soldiers dug into the earth. Trenches stretched across France like scars. Mud became home. Rats became companions. The ground filled with water, blood, and fear. Officers spoke of holding the line, but the line held them instead. The war slowed into something worse. Time itself felt trapped. Soldiers realized this was not a phase. This was the war now. Trench life crushed the soul before it killed the body. Days passed in silence, broken by sudden explosions. Sleep came in fragments. Food was cold. Water was dirty. Disease spread faster than bullets. Soldiers learned to read danger in small sounds. A whistle, a click, a scream. Letters from home felt like messages from another world. Hope became dangerous. Yet humor survived, dark and bitter. Laughing was a form of rebellion. Staying human was an act of resistance. Between opposing trenches lay no man's land, a place without mercy. Barbed wire shredded bodies. Craters filled with water and bones. Crossing it meant near certain death. Attacks were announced by whistles, giving the enemy time to prepare. Men climbed ladders, knowing many would not return. Some froze halfway. Some ran. Some prayed. No man's land did not care. It swallowed everyone equally. This strip of earth became the most feared place on the planet. Technology raced ahead of thinking. Poison gas drifted across trenches, burning lungs and eyes. Artillery shells fell endlessly. Tanks appeared, strange and terrifying, yet strategies barely changed. Commanders believed one more push would break the enemy. Soldiers paid the price. Innovation did not bring mercy, it brought efficiency. Killing became industrial. The gap between those giving orders and those dying grew wider every day. In the East, the war looked different. Front lines shifted constantly. Distances were vast, supply lines fragile. Armies collapsed and reformed. Civilians were caught in motion, forced to flee again and again. Victory and defeat blurred together. Chaos ruled. While the West drowned in mud, the East drowned in instability. Empires began to crack under the strain. The war spread south. The Ottoman Empire entered the conflict, opening new fronts. Deserts, mountains, and seas became battlegrounds. Soldiers fought heat, thirst, and unfamiliar terrain. Promises were made to local populations. Most were broken. The war was no longer European. It was global. And every new front added new suffering. By the end of the first year, the truth was clear. This war would not end quickly. It would not end cleanly. Millions were already dead or wounded. Nations were exhausted, yet committed. Leaders spoke of sacrifice. Soldiers understood the cost. The illusion was gone. What remained was endurance. And the worst was still ahead.